tonight it is all things Seminoles. Grab a drink and join us on tonight's tailgate. Joining us tonight, as always, I'm Luke, and I'm here with Michael.
That's great.
Dennis is not here tonight, so
he decided he was too cool for school.
He is too cool for us tonight, and luckily tonight we have a really special guest. We have Jesse from Plant the Spear to help us talk about Florida State today. Jesse, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Just excited. You know, it's spring football time. Things are heating up. We got a spring game coming up this week. And then, of course, the portal's open. So that's like the most wild, crazy time in college football. So kind of keeping our eyes peeled there. But, I mean, just really excited to come on here and talk some football. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, the chaos with spring portal. It's I feel like every portal opening now is like, oh, is it going to be crazier than last one?
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Well, awesome. Well, let's just hop into this. So obviously Florida State, kind of the big thing with the big news this past year at the end of the season was Nick Saban announcing his retirement. I think there was a pretty short list of people who Alabama was going to go for. And I do believe Mike Norvell, I always want to say Norvell. I want to get into that Southern thing, but Norvell, that he was on that list. So was there any worry from y'all with him? Were you pretty comfortable knowing like he's going to stick with Florida State? What's your thoughts there? What were your thoughts there?
I definitely think there was some nervousness in the fan base. I mean, without a doubt. Now, a lot of people said Norvell wasn't really actively pursued by them, but the reports have come out since then that he was top probably 3 on their list.
Sure.
And I think from like a Florida State fan perspective, of course, we were nervous because we just, you know, we had Bobby for 40 years. So like we didn't have to worry about coaching changes. And then of course, Jimbo was like the head coach in waiting, went on to win a national championship. And then Willie Taggart happened. So we were like, okay, this could get rocky if you have to start changing. And it's like Mike Norvell came into a really, really dire situation and turned the program around in a short amount of time. And it was kind of like, man, if we lose him, are we going to be able to get it right twice? Now, there was also rumblings that if he would have went, they were going to go after Lane Kiffin, which I think would have been just a wild, maybe not my first choice, but man, it would have been interesting just to see him in the state of Florida with going back and forth with those guys. But I think it was a big sigh of relief to keep him. And I think it really does speak to what he's done.
Sure.
I know people like to, you know, kind of trash on the transfer portal route that he's went, but I think people have to understand that he did that to bridge a gap, first off, to get to where you get success and to bring into high school recruiting up to where it is now. But it's just modern college football, man. I mean, over 2,000 players entered the portal the last go around, and who knows how many are going to hit it this time. Like, it's basically free agency. And so we're thrilled to have a coach that embraces that modern recruiting style. But yeah, we were nervous there for a little bit, but I will say the best thing is now Florida State has really good people in their administration, a very good athletic director. And so you kind of trusted that they were going to be able to handle things.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm surprised you brought up Taggart. I just figured most Florida State fans wanted to kind of like forget about that and just kind of like breeze over it as much as possible.
And honestly,
well, I know we're going to bring up some scars with the CFP anyway. So you know what? If we're digging, we might as well bring them all out.
We'll get there in a second. I mean, I will say you guys are probably not out of you haven't escaped the Lane Kiffin train yet in the sense of being in Florida. It's very possible that University of Florida might end up getting him if Billy has another bad year. Because we know,
which I think is going to happen.
Oh, yes. I agree with you.
I think it's over for Billy after this year. I think I know it's not a Florida section, but I think getting Lagway got him this year, and this will probably be it. So
he's a great recruiter. But it's I just feel like it's relevant that we can bring them up because you guys that's your rival. So
that's schedule. I mean, goodness gracious, that is a brutal schedule.
Yeah, we talked one week about just how like the football gods were not generous to him on a year that he's going into it with all kinds of questions. It's just like, hey, here you go, hardest schedule in college football. Good luck.
Right.
Good luck. Prove yourself.
Yeah.
So.
But if you guys do have to deal with Lane Kiffin, take it from a Tennessee fan. He's not fun.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
He was on our team.
I know, right?
Speaking of scars.
Let's just
for real. Yeah.
14 years.
So like you said, one of the big things last year, obviously the big news for Florida State was being left out of the college football playoffs. I think when I was watching it and when I was kind of watching it all unfold, I thought there were kind of two kind of groups that kind of came out, right? You had the group when everybody announced like all these guys are going to sit out. You had the
Hmm.
group that just said, "Well, I get it. They don't have anything to play for." And then I felt yeah, like you had the group on the other side that was saying, "Well, go out and prove that you should have been there. Go out and play
Right.
this Georgia team and prove something to them." I know kind of, I don't know that it was very split. I think most Florida State fans, especially, were on the side of like, well, what's the point?
Mhm.
What were your takes on all of that? Kind of what was, walk me through a a Florida State fan's mind during
Sure.
all of that and afterwards.
Well, I first will back it up a little bit because
Hmm.
they had really kind of started laying the case, a few weeks
Sure.
before that when they talked about Florida State getting jumped before Jordan Travis got
Hmm.
hurt. And so we had kind of been hinting on our show, like, I mean, look, it would be ridiculous if it happened, but
Right.
don't be surprised if it happens. And then Jordan Travis got hurt. And
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
knew that it was like, okay, this is certainly a possibility. And I do also think this is something that I've said before. I think the way Mike Norvell was under the assumption of a win and you're in,
Hmm.
like in the Louisville game, everybody said, well, your offense looked terrible. That wasn't an offense that deserved to be in the playoffs. But I think if you're under the mindset of winning, you're in,
Hmm.
you're not going to let a true freshman go out there and lose you the
Right.
game. So he did what
True.
he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then what we said, what was funny was the team with the best defense ended up winning the national championship, and their offense was not stellar.
Right.
So I think that Florida State with Jordan Travis, to me personally, and I'll die on this hill, that they would have won the national championship last year. I
Yeah.
just think that team was that good.
Mhm.
Ma- That's also knowing Georgia didn't make it in the playoffs because I think Georgia
Right.
probably was the best team in the country last year. They just can't beat Nick Saban in Atlanta.
Mm.
But irregardless, I think when you got to that point and you felt just that feeling of like, wow, this really just happened. And I think what was so disappointing was people, like you said, people expected them to go out there and try and prove something when it
Mhm.
was like, look, they won 13 games. What is
Yeah.
winning a game against Georgia going to do? Are they going to put them in the playoffs? Did
Right.
Georgia, who went out and beat us by 60 points, I mean, they got a bowl of oranges. They didn't get a trophy. They didn't get into the playoffs. It didn't prove anything.
Mhm.
Florida State still ended up signing a top 5 transfer class. So, like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the players took it for what it was. I think the coaches took it for what it was. That, like, look, we did literally everything you could ask us to do. We beat every opponent in front of us. And I mean, they blew out most of the teams on their schedule. I know
Mhm.
they had a couple of close games in there,
Mhm.
but it's like, what was there to prove? Now, I would have liked to see them play. I get that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I felt really bad for Mike Norvell to have to go out there and wear that beating by him, kind of by himself.
Right.
But at the same time, I also employ people to think like it's easy to say when you don't have an NFL check hanging over your head. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah.
that is life
Right.
changing money. And you look at Will Shipley in the Clemson Kentucky game,
Yeah.
Mhm.
got carted off the field. So it's like I get it. I think it was a really gut wrenching moment. It really spurned a lot of the fan base. Like, now you talk about conference realignment, people don't even want to think about the SEC because it's tied to ESPN. It's a scar that's probably not going to heal for a really, really long
Right.
time.
Mhm.
But I think that the way Mike Norvell moved past it, you look back and you say, well, this sucks, but there's
Mhm.
nothing we can do about it.
Mhm.
Right.
So the only thing you can do is respond. And that's pretty much what he's tried to preach ever since. And they have a little saying kind of through spring camp of leave no doubt. That's kind
Yeah.
of their thing for 2024. So I
Okay.
think it's more, I hate to say it, and I know with some of the guaranteed spots and things like that in the playoffs, maybe the committee isn't as influential. I
Mhm.
think you're going to push sportsmanship out the door. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to see Florida State had 2 or 3 games where they kind of took a knee or slowed down when they had the game won. I don't think you're going to see that anymore because you're going to want those style points. It's
Yep.
kind of
Sure.
forever changed the game, but it was really really painful because I feel like Florida State could have done more than just get in the playoffs. I feel like
Mhm.
they really could have competed, but at the same time, like I said, you still signed a top 5 transfer class. You still kind of the NIL collective said they had the most the best week they've had since they started the week
Mhm.
that happened. I know for our channel, like we had the most views, the most social interaction that
Yeah.
Nice.
entire week. So if you can look at it from a positive light, it's kind of circled the
Sure.
bandwagon.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that as an Ohio State fan losing to Michigan 3 years in a row now. Like it
Yeah,
has united the fan base, and like,
yeah,
okay, donations going to those NIL funds. So I definitely get that.
I completely understand as a Tennessee fan that lost to Alabama for
Right.
15 years in a
Right.
row.
Right. Yeah.
uh,
We just have higher standards. It's okay.
yeah, what?
Um, no, yeah, and I get, and like I think with the Florida, with them losing, with the guys sitting out, the guys that I always have the hard part, and I'm old school. I'm gonna go prove it every single time. I'm gonna
Sure.
go
Same,
out and
same.
that's how I feel, and I'm slowly getting into this. Well, they've got NFL checks. You got to take care of yourself. I'm
Right.
slowly getting into that. I just thought about like the fifth year senior who went out there and this is his
Yeah.
last game and all of his buddies are sitting out and he's never going to play in the NFL. He's going to go sell insurance,
Mhm.
but he's out there playing and getting, and so that's where I
Yeah.
always have
Well,
the hard part
and,
for him.
and and I will say that we did have some guys in that position. And
Hmm.
then also I want to say because there was a really big thing, mostly from like rival fan bases, that it's a
Sure.
culture issue. And it's like, look, we didn't
Mhm.
have
No.
anybody sit out last year.
Right.
Georgia had, I think, 8 or 9 guys sit out the year before the
Hmm.
last non-playoff game that they made. Like this is not exclusive to Florida State. I
No.
wouldn't even say it's an issue. I wouldn't even be surprised if Mike Norvell told a few of the guys like, look, you just don't worry about it, man. You got an
Yeah.
opportunity here because truthfully, I almost think like it. I mean, let's be honest. Without Jordan Travis, we probably weren't beating Georgia anyway. So, like, if
Right.
you have 10 guys get healthy and go into the NFL,
Hmm.
that's probably as beneficial for your image as a program
Yeah.
as it is losing to Georgia by 20 instead of 40
Right.
or well 60. Jesus, but I
Hmm.
definitely agree that I think it's not. I don't want it to be an indication on the culture there because
Hmm.
I think that has been something that has been good on Florida State. But yeah, man, it's a travesty the way things are going like that. I mean, I hate to
Yeah.
say that to think that the Orange Bowl is really completely irrelevant,
Right.
but I mean, it's the way things are going. But I definitely think after that, I think it's tough to
Hmm.
see that happen. But there were some guys that did stick it in there,
Hmm.
and some
Good.
guys did say too at the end they were like, "Man, if I could go back, I would have played." But
Hmm.
it is what it is.
It is
Water
what
under
it
the
is.
bridge now.
Yeah,
So
can't go back and change that. So
Sure.
now the coaching staff has remained pretty intact, hasn't it? You haven't seen
yeah,
many
we
losses in there, right?
No on-field changes. They
Okay.
did bring in 2 off-the-field guys.
Mm.
Obviously, that's not as influential on your play, but
Right.
it's cool for us because we brought back Ernie Sims,
Hmm.
obviously a famous linebacker at Florida State,
Yep.
and then also Rick Stockstill, who was the coach at Middle Tennessee for a really long
Oh
time.
yeah,
So you bring in 2
Okay.
guys as,
he was a
as
good one.
analysts to replace some
Yeah.
other guys, but other than that, off the field stayed the same.
Awesome.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I will say like my grandmom, she went to Florida State, and I know that like just this kind of going back a little bit to the CFP thing, just one little point. Like when your grandparents who don't watch football are getting riled up about my granddad went to Georgia
Yeah.
and he's riled up about the fact that like, oh, they didn't make it in even though they won everything. This makes no
Hmm.
sense. And I was like, man. Phew. But anyways, what other like
Simmer down,
yeah, I
Granny.
know simmer
Right.
down.
Well, I love to
Sim,
see it, man. I
oh,
love to see the
Yeah.
passion because I think
yeah.
it was, I think Kirk is going to be. I hope they got some extra like
Mm.
security nets behind them when they go to Ireland for the game
Yes.
Fair
day because
enough, yeah.
that's going to be really interesting. But it's funny too because all my family and like my wife are Georgia fans, so I literally watched the game at like a Georgia watch
Oh,
party. That was
Oh
very
gosh.
painful experience. So yeah, I'm with
I
them. I'm riled
understand.
up too.
I get you. But so what is going? What are you hearing from like from with the transfer portal? Like what like that obviously that gets crazy. You guys did a
Yeah.
phenomenal job bringing in guys and players from Alabama. But it's kind of a two-parter question. You got these guys that are coming in. Who are also you're like kind of got your eye on for this next season? Like you think is just going to have a blowout season? Is just going to just is going to be amazing.
So I think on offense, my
Mhm.
guy that I've been championing the whole offseason is Malik Benson. I think this guy is special. I think people will look at last year at Alabama where it was like, okay, he had like
Mhm.
230 something yards, not a whole lot of production. And I was
Right.
like, well, I mean, you had Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton. You had a kind of a running back as a quarterback. He
Yep.
was transitioning from JUCO. So I think he needed that year as transition. And I think
Mhm.
now this year, he's set up to have a really big season. I think also, I hate to just go with all transfers necessarily from Alabama, but I also like Rodeo Williams. I mean,
I
when you
mean,
watch
fair
his
enough.
tape,
Yeah.
I think he's
Yeah.
got a good combination of power and patience. And I
Yeah.
think Florida State does have some guys that are non-transfer as well that you're looking at to have a big season, like Lawrence Toafili, the running back for us. He's going to probably be your feature back. And then of course there's DJU, which is really the one that
Mm-hmm.
you either feel some
Mhm.
type of way about that. You're either one side or
Yeah.
the other. You either love them or you're not sure about it. And I really just think when you look at DJU, you need him to have a good season. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
you need him to be a Heisman winner. I think Florida State's
Mhm.
going to have another good defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to be able to run the ball well this year. They got depth on the offensive line. They got a really deep running back room, and they got big physical receivers
Mm-hmm.
who might be better at blocking than receiving. So that's something that there too that'll lead into the run game. But I think you just need him to be good enough. And I think when you look back at Mike Norvell
Mm-hmm.
and his history with quarterbacks, DJU has not thrown for 3,000 yards in one season yet in his career.
Mm.
Mike Norvell, since his time as offensive coordinator or head coach, he's never had one consistent starting quarterback for an entire season throw for less than 3,000 yards, except for
Wow.
2020, the COVID year when they only played 9 games.
Wow.
So I'm
Interesting.
hoping that he can unlock something in DJU
Sure.
to just make him good enough for what we need him to
Mhm.
be. I mean, people do forget. I think he was the 206 all-time recruit in 247 history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the potential is certainly there. And then of course on defense, if you want to throw a guy out there, obviously Marvin Jones Jr. is one that we're looking to have a big
Yep.
season. I
Mhm.
mean, you look at Florida State, they had Jermaine Johnson, and
Mm-hmm.
then they go to Jared Verse, and now you're hoping that Marvin Jones Jr. can be that guy to step in and be that other dominant defensive end alongside of Patrick Payton, who's been really good as well.
Fair enough.
I just hear all these names and I'm just like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot they had him. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
forgot about
Yeah,
that."
the funny
Strange
thing
depth.
really about Florida State in 2024 is if you want to compare it like with a car reference, I think in
Mhm.
2023 you had like a couple of Lambos in the
Mhm.
garage, and I think this year it's more like a fleet of Corvettes.
Okay.
You don't quite have as many high end guys,
Right.
but you have a really, really stacked roster of like really good blue chip college football
Mhm.
players. They actually have probably more talented roster this year, just
Mm-hmm.
maybe not some of the high end guys like a Keon Coleman or Jordan
Right.
Travis.
Yeah, one
Mm-hmm.
one of the guys that came to y'all that I absolutely love. He was one of my favorite players last year. Was Jalen Lucas, the running back that came from
Yes.
Yeah.
Indiana.
Because
Um,
of his last name.
because of his last name. It's my name. I love it. But no, like it was interesting. We had a guy from Indiana on, and he was talking about how they just misused him. He's so
Yeah.
quick, he's so elusive, and they misused him. And he said that he thinks Florida State and Norvell is going to use him a whole lot better. And I'm really interested to see him and that whole like I forgot about the running backs that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
That is a stacked running back unit. I mean, that's going to look good, and hopefully they
Oh
can
yeah.
use him a
Yeah.
lot better because I want
I
to see
think
him do
he's
well.
I think he's going to be special. And so
Hmm.
far, I will say, like in camp, they have said that he looks to be exactly why you brought him in.
Really.
He already looks like he's going to be the starting returner. Obviously, he was, all American returner, so you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have that too. I think you'll see him line up at the slot. I think you're going to see him come out of the
Hmm.
backfield doing a lot of catch work, similar to what you see with his brother Ja'Kai Douglas, who is
Yep.
also on our team.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think we might lose a guy into the portal out of the running back room, but man, yeah, I think they got 4 or 5 guys in there that can contribute. But I am also with you. I think Jalen Lucas
Hmm.
as a returner and a running back is
Yep.
going to be really a game changer for us this year.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like him in that slot. If he's working in that slot, that's going to be good too. Really
Yeah.
like that.
So what other news do you have coming out of Florida for you guys? What are you seeing, especially after like spring stuff is already kind of wrapped up, or at least what we get to see in the public eye? Like
Right.
what are you guys what are you hearing on in the field, off the field, stuff like that?
Mhm.
So
So what we're looking at right now, we have about I think 3 or 4 more practices. The spring game is on Saturday, so
Mhm.
we're just wrapping up. And of course, you have to couch all this with like we
hmm
don't know who's going to be on the roster a week from now, so you
sure.
have
Right.
to wait to see that as well. But I think right now you're looking at the offensive line could get a little bit better, but you also
Mhm.
added some really good transfers and Richie Leonard from Florida and TJ Ferguson from Alabama. So they have
Sure.
depth.
Yep.
It's just that group was so beat up last year. It's getting healthy. At quarterback, DJU, I mean, he came into camp at 255. He was a little
Ooh.
heavy, but they said that towards the end
Hmm.
of camp, he's shed some good weight. He looks like what they need him to be. So you're hoping
Okay.
that DJU can be
Yeah.
there. Our young quarterbacks are dealing with some issues there as far as health wise. They actually just ruled both of them out for the rest of spring today.
Oh wow.
And then wide receiver for us, I think right now it's one of the craziest positions. I was like, you
Hmm.
really, really like this wide receiver room, but I don't know that you really, really love it because you have so much talent, but
Hmm.
really no production to hang your hat on. So the guessing game is going to be at wide receiver where you have a lot of good clay to work with. There's just no production to lean on. Running backs are deep. I think you'll be good there. Defensive line, I think Florida State across the front four could be one of the best rotations in the country. I think they have some really dominant guys. Defensive end is literally three deep. I mean, three, they
Hmm.
could bring in three sets of guys that are all that good. Defensive tackle's thin. I think they
Okay.
really need to go hunting, big game hunting in the defensive tackle position in the portal.
Hmm.
But you're going to be competing against basically every team in the country that needs a
Right.
defensive tackle. So we're
Hmm.
pretty thin there. Linebacker was kind of a point of weakness for us in the past, and we lost the two best ones that we had. So we
Okay.
brought back a third. They've added
Okay.
Sean Murphy from Alabama. That's another transfer coming in there.
Hmm.
They have some young guys that haven't played a lot but are talented, and like Blake Nicholson. And then you also, the secondary, we have to replace one safety, but pretty much everybody else is, I mean, you lost Renardo Green, your starting corner, and you lost your Jerry Jones, your nickel, but you have guys, you have Earl Little Jr. comes in from Alabama, probably going to start at nickel. You got Azaria Thomas, who a lot of us think can be an first team all ACC type corner. He's going to
Hmm.
step in at corner as well. So I really think the defense is going to be good if they can get some depth in the defensive tackle position. I think the offense will be good if we can get like an alpha dog to step up a receiver. That's
Sure.
really
Yeah.
just what I'm looking for right now. So I'm excited for Saturday to be able to see this team and kind of see some of the things that we're looking for and to get a good look at this first in person look at this roster.
Oh, that's right. Your spring
This spring
scrimmage
game's
has
on Saturday.
is this upcoming
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yep.
I forgot everybody else's was this past weekend. So yeah, I'm sorry. I just
Didn't do your
I
homework.
didn't do my homework, obviously. All the different spring games that are going on. I just cared about mine. Let's be
It's a
honest.
lot to keep up with though.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I watched part of Florida's, which was just hilariously bad.
Mhm.
Uh, it's
Which
funny.
I love to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always good. You know, when they're doing their spring practice and they can only get 10 people on
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
like what in the world?
Oh, Miami's was about the same.
Yeah,
So
well, you know what? No,
uh,
you guys might not have much competition down in Florida
not in Florida
this
this
year.
year.
I know, and Miami's bleeding right now. I mean, they've lost
Yeah.
two running backs and their backup quarterback like
Yeah,
today alone. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's going to be interesting.
yeah, for sure.
So next year, looking at the schedule that you guys have, what are you projecting? What do you think? Are you going to run the table again? You going to fall somewhere? Maybe.
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is it's really hard to go undefeated. I know
Hmm.
last year they did
Sure.
it. I mean, I love piling on Florida. I'm glad I have someone here that loves to pile on Florida too.
Yeah.
Florida's been playing football 110 years and has never had an undefeated season. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
a stat that you knew, but
I
you
did
can use
not.
that from now on. So never managed to do it. So it's hard. And last year, I think Florida State to be able to go undefeated, they had the narrow escape at Boston College, overtime at
Hmm.
Clemson. It was pretty awesome to do. I don't know that they go undefeated this year,
Mm.
but I think their schedule's actually easier. I mean, when
Hmm.
you look at you get Clemson at home, I really think I think you break this down to a 3 to possibly 4 game schedule. I think you have
Sure.
obviously the home game at Clemson,
Right.
Hmm.
which is going to be tough, which is going to be fun because you get
Hmm.
DJU against his old team.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But Florida State did go manage to beat them in Death Valley last year,
True.
so you feel like you could probably do that.
Hmm.
And then you got at Miami. That's going to
Hmm.
be a tough one too because it's
Sure.
a rivalry game. Miami
Hmm.
does have Cam Ward. They got some talent in there. The,
Yep.
the thing is with like Miami on a side note is like they are the best team in the country at doing less with more. Like
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
a talented roster and never do anything with it. And I was looking it up the other day, and I think Mike Norvell is something like 19-2 against talent rosters that are more talented than his. When you look at or like
That
eight and
doesn't.
two, and then
Yeah.
19-2
Yeah.
against ones
Doesn't
that are
surprise
worse.
me.
So like he wins all the games he's supposed to, and he does very well in the games where they have a little bit of a talent edge. So I mean, they beat Clemson, Miami, Florida, and LSU last year, all
Hmm.
who in the 247 composite were ranked with a better roster than them.
Right.
So
Mhm.
just because you have the talent edge doesn't mean you're going to win the game.
Nope.
So if you can get by Miami down in Hard Rock, which will probably be mostly FSU fans, but that's like the one game a year they show up for.
Sure.
Then you have at Notre Dame. That's
Yeah.
really where your season hinges, I think. Now, I'll be interested to follow along that I've seen Riley Leonard is missing some time with some injuries, so that
Hmm.
could change the trajectory of their season.
True.
And then I will throw Florida in there just because it is a rivalry game late in the season, but I think they're really realistically going to be on the back end of a 6 to 7 game losing streak. I
Yeah.
think Lagway might be the quarterback by then with an interim coach.
Yeah.
But with that, I think if you can get past Miami, Clemson, and Notre Dame, I think
Hmm.
Florida State has the ability to go undefeated. I think their floor is probably 9-3. And just
Okay.
because we don't know what DJU is going to do, we don't know
Hmm.
what's going to happen in the portal. I think that if Florida State were to keep most of their good players,
Hmm.
not take any major losses, and if you go get me a defensive tackle, I mean, maybe you strike gold twice and get another Keon Coleman or something like that, and
Sure.
just a decent linebacker.
Hmm.
I think that Florida State can go undefeated again, but I got us more at like 11-1, maybe dropping that
Fair
one at
enough.
Notre Dame or Clemson at home. So I think they're good enough to get into the playoffs.
Sure.
And I think when you look at the ACC road, I think you can get into the ACC championship. Might be another rematch with Louisville, although their transfers are kind of fleeing right now, and
Mm-hmm.
then Clemson as well there. But the ACC's got some actually pretty decent looking teams
Yeah.
this year, so
Sure.
it'll be interesting to see if they make it.
So one last thing that I've got for you before we sign off here. There's been some speculation in the media in just the past 24 hours or so that I've been seeing of ESPN, since they hold a lot of the media rights deals for the ACC and the SEC, that there's potentially some sideways dealings where the where FSU and Clemson might find their way into the SEC without
Yeah,
the ACC blowing up, essentially. Because I mean, obviously, there's the entire exit and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and
right.
I honestly applaud FSU for taking that on, because that's
Mm-hmm.
them and Clemson need to. It was a bad deal. It needed to be dealt with. Um, and but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's some legitimacy there, or are you like, you know what, I don't want to go to the SEC. I'd prefer to go to the Big Ten, or I'd prefer to go to the Big 12, which would be kind of a weird move, but you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, so without going like into the nuts and bolts of the
sure.
lawsuit and things like that, I think really I have heard that too. And basically, ESPN, the rumor is that ESPN is going to strong arm the ACC and the SEC to basically be like, we're going to move two chips from one pot to the other, and then the ACC doesn't die. You guys get what you want, and we don't
Right.
lose money because we're not losing two big football brands.
Right.
Sure.
And to me, it makes a lot of sense. The
Mm-hmm.
problem that I've heard, and I have to say that I'm not a lawyer. I say that on every one of our ACC lawsuit shows. But there are some people that said like that could violate antitrust laws, and then you might have a school like UNC or someone else who wants out that immediately
Yeah.
raises their hand and says, "Oh no, we're filing a lawsuit too because we want out as well."
Sure.
So I don't know the legality of it happening, but I think it's probably your best answer as to how to squash this whole thing. And
Right.
and the latest development that I saw, and actually today, was that ESPN is looking at, so with the ACC, their grant of rights runs through 2036, but
Hmm.
there's a unilateral option to
Hmm.
extend in 2027 that has to
Hmm.
be picked up next year in February. And the thing that I saw today by the guy that put the original theory out said that ESPN is going to sign that extension to basically lock Florida State and Clemson in to keep them from
Hmm.
going to the Big Ten. I don't know if that's how it's going to
Interesting.
work unless they buy their way out. But
Yeah.
me personally, from a personal perspective, I wanted the SEC. I know
Okay.
it's funny because we did a conference realignment show, and I went on another podcast and I said I thought we wanted the Big Ten, and it sparked quite a heated debate in the comments. So
Sure.
we did a poll. We asked over 2,000 people on our page.
Okay.
Okay.
67% said they wanted to go to the Big Ten.
Mhm.
I think
Interesting.
if you had asked that before the snub, it would have been 70% to the SEC. I don't think people
Hmm.
wanted to go unless it was with ESPN. But man, at the end of the day, I get it. I don't like ESPN either. They own the playoffs. You kind
Yeah.
of can't not deal with ESPN in college football. I just think of like that LSU series that we did with if that would have been a home and home in Baton Rouge and Tallahassee, that would have
Yeah.
been amazing. I was in New Orleans. It was a great time.
Sure.
We actually have Alabama coming up in 25 and
Yeah.
26 and Georgia coming up in 27, 28. Probably won't even end up playing those. Might be conference games. Who knows?
Right.
I just think the regionality and the matchups of the
Mhm.
SEC would be extremely fun for Florida State and
Hmm.
probably Clemson. So the only thing I worry about is losing maybe the Miami rivalry, but at least you would still keep Florida. So we'll
Yeah.
see how it shakes out. I think Florida State, I do think they're going to get out of the ACC sooner than 2036. But as with
Yeah.
anything legal, I don't think it's going to be any time real soon. I think Florida State plays in the ACC maybe even in 2025. But
Right.
Mhm.
it's kind of keeping eyes on all angles because it really is the big
Sure.
news right now.
That's fair.
Well, and I always said I wanted Florida State in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, I want the recruiting. I want that Florida recruiting.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think there's a huge, like, when people ask, do they want Florida State? I think you have to
mhm.
look at that gives you an opening into the TV market in Florida.
Yep.
It opens the recruiting lanes, and I think a lot of people also want the Big Ten from a Florida State perspective because education and research and AAU and all the doors that it opens up, and it's a nationwide conference. And if you
Mhm.
extend into Florida, then you literally are from north to south to east to west.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
the Big Ten is a great great conference to be in. To me, as someone who travels to games,
Yeah,
I just
makes
think the
more sense.
regionality it makes way more sense. So
Hmm.
yeah, I would love it. But yeah, man, it's anything's better than the ACC for us at this point. So
All right,
Awesome.
Mountain West. I'm just kidding.
Right.
okay, maybe not that. Maybe not that.
You mean you don't want to go to a group of 5 and just dominate?
That it would be cool. Now, I still think we're going to end up with super conferences and
Yeah, I
maybe like
agree.
regulation and all that kind of crazy stuff. So yeah,
Sure.
it would be fun. I live close to App State, so like I
Oh
love the
yeah.
Fun Belt. I
Oh
just
yeah.
Oh
don't
yeah,
want to be in it.
Yeah,
that's
that's
right.
fair. That's
That's
fair.
what most people think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for being on. Can you throw out your podcast, your Twitter, all that kind of stuff, just so everybody knows where to find you?
Yeah, definitely. You can find us at plantthespear.com. We have a website, kind of our hub for everything. We have obviously written articles, videos, podcasts, all linked over there. You can check us out on YouTube, of course, at Plant the Spear. Twitter, Plant the Spear one. Kind of we're late to the jump on getting the original name there. Hook me up, Elon. What are you waiting on? So
Come
yeah,
on.
just check us out over there. We cover pretty much all the sports that we can for Florida State: baseball, basketball, as well as softball and football. And so, yeah, check it out if you're looking for some Florida State coverage. We're a fan site. We're not beat writers, so we try and put our own twist on everything, and
Fair
just
enough.
we love what we do. So we're guys that bleed garnet and gold, and we'd love to have everybody.
Awesome.
There you go.
Well, again, thanks for joining us, and all the luck this upcoming season.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have you guys on sometime this next season. I mean, there's so many good games that you guys have that it would be fun to have you on afterwards. It might make a ton of sense to do it after Clemson, just because of the weird rivalry that's definitely going to happen this year because of DJ. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, anytime you want me on, I always love talking college football, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. So just give me a shout, and we'll chop it up.
Sounds good. All right.
Awesome.
Have a
I
great night.
appreciate it, guys. You too. Thank you.